Hello everyone, and welcome to War in Middle-earth, a series where I take you through all of the major wars and conflicts throughout the history of Middle-earth, from the First Age to the Fourth Age. In this episode, we look at the aftermath of Morgoth's victory at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. The 50 years following that battle would perhaps be the darkest days Middle-earth had ever seen, and would see the Elves and the Edain clinging to life on the edge of the continent. In the previous episode, we covered the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, also known as the Nonneath Arnodiad, fought in the year 472 of the First Age. This battle saw the destruction of Hithlum and Dor Loman, the betrayal of the Easterlings, and the breaking of the Sons of Feanor. Morgoth's total victory would now be inevitable. It would simply take time to mop up what remained of the resistance in Beleriand. This resistance consisted of Brethil, Doriath, the Falas, Gondolin, Nargothrond, Osiriand, and the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains. From Morgoth's perspective, Doriath, Gondolin, and Nargothrond were the biggest threats, but Gondolin and Nargothrond were hidden from him, and Doriath was protected by the Girdle of Melian. As for the other lands, Brethil was relatively weak, Osiriand was irrelevant, and the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains could be safely ignored. This left one target, the Falas. Following the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, refugees from many lands had been fleeing to the Falas, seeking salvation by the sea, and Morgoth was aware of this. The Falas had escaped his wrath once before, and without the power of Hithlum to defend them, they were easy targets. Seeing no reason to delay, he sent forth an army in the year of 473, and this army passed through Hithlum and Nevrast, avoiding Nargothrond's territory. Eglorest and Brithombar were besieged again, just like they had been almost 500 years ago. The difference this time is that no help was coming, and eventually Morgoth's forces broke through, sacking both cities. Most of the residents were slain or enslaved, but some managed to escape by ship to the Isle of Balar, far to the south, and they established a refuge there. Among those survivors were Círdan and a young Gil-galad, the son of Orodreth. With destruction of the Falas, the last land that openly defied Morgoth had been destroyed. Despite this further victory, Morgoth decided to wait and rebuild the strength he had lost. After all, his victory was pretty much inevitable at this point, so hurrying wouldn't really make a difference. His orcs slowly established dominance over the wide, open lands of Beleriand, but Morgoth's giant armies would remain inactive for a while. Despite that, Morgoth's malice was still working in his favour, and now I'm going to cover some major events that would define the next 50 years. And this is a bit of a rabbit hole, so bear with me on this one. If you watched last episode, you'll remember Hurin. He was the Lord of Dor Loman, and he was captured at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. From Hurin, Morgoth attempted to learn the location of Gondolin, as Hurin had been there once in his youth. Hurin refused to give any information, so Morgoth cursed Hurin and his family, and this curse would have major ramifications in the future. Hurin's young son, Turin, was sent to Doriath shortly after the battle, and he was fostered by King Thingol, as Turin was distantly related to Beren, a rare non-dick move by Thingol. Turin is a great leader, charismatic, and an excellent fighter, but he's also prideful and arrogant. Now, Turin would grow up there, protected from the curse, but this would change in the year of 484. Turin, now aged 20, exiles himself from Doriath following a confrontation which eventually resulted in a naked guy breaking his neck in a river. I'm not making that up, by the way. After leaving Doriath, Turin takes control of a band of outlaws. Now, outlaws are pretty common in this time, and they mostly consist of men, either of Beor or Hador's folk, who have lost their lands and are now doing whatever they can to survive. Sometimes that even involves attacking other men or elves. Turin isn't happy with this, so he organises these outlaws into a force that fights against Morgoth, and they make their main base atop the hill of Amon-Rud. Later, Turin is joined by his friend, Beleg Strongbow, and for a while, Morgoth's forces are driven back from those lands south of Brethil. However, this is little more than amusement to Morgoth, and eventually he dispatches a force that destroys the outlaws, and Turin is taken prisoner to be brought back to Angband. Beleg rescues Turin, coming across Gwindor, the same Gwindor who was captured by Morgoth during the start of the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. But in a freak accident, Turin accidentally kills Beleg as he is being rescued, the curse coming into effect. Gwindor then takes Turin to Nargothrond, and this is where Nargothrond's problems begin. Initially, Turin keeps his identity a secret because he fears Morgoth's curse is associated with his name. As it turns out, Finduilas, the daughter of King Orodreth, becomes infatuated with Turin, which upsets Gwindor, who loved Finduilas before he left for war, but now Gwindor is kind of messed up and Turin is in the spotlight. Upset that he's being cockblocked, Gwindor reveals Turin's true identity, which backfires, because now the elves of Nargothrond love Turin even more. Turin drops his persona and quickly rises up the ranks until he's King Orodref's closest advisor. Now, Orodref is kind of a weak king, and Turin quickly becomes the power behind the throne, which is a problem because Turin's ideas are kind of stupid. He advises that Nargothrond abandon their secrecy and openly go to war with Morgoth, and Orodref agrees for some reason. A mighty bridge is built over the chasm that leads to Nargothrond, and Nargothrond's soldiers start marching out to battle. This delights Morgoth because one of his chief foes has now revealed themselves, and in 495 he sends a large army south led by Glaurung, the dragon. Nargothrond's army marches north to meet them, and the two forces clash on the plains of Tumhalad. This battle ends up being a complete disaster for Nargothrond, and Orodref and Gwindor are slain in the vanguard. Nargothrond's remaining soldiers attempt to destroy the bridge to Nargothrond, but they can't do it in time, and Nargothrond is destroyed by Glaurung and his orcs. Turin ends up surviving the battle, and we could continue to follow his life, but it would take hours. To wrap it up shortly, Turin eventually kills Glaurung whilst defending Brethil, but he, along with his sister Nienor and Brandir, the Lord of Brethil, all end up tragically dying shortly afterwards. A story that can be truly summarised as, and then everyone dies. But Morgoth's curse doesn't end with Turin. A year after Turin's death, in 500 of the First Age, Hurin is released from Angband, a bitter old man aged 60. He first journeys to Dor Lomond, where he acquires a following of Edain refugees. North of Brethil, he abandons these refugees and searches for a way back to Gondolin. He can't find it, and in despair he yells out for Turgon several times. This seems like a relatively harmless act, but at this point in time, Morgoth's spies are everywhere. Knowing that Hurin is looking for Turgon, Morgoth now has a rough idea of where Gondolin is located. Hurin then goes south, ending up in Brethil. Here, the men of the House of Haleth have had something of a succession crisis following the death of Brandir. Two men of the family's junior branches, Hardang and Manfor, contest the succession, with Hardang eventually coming out on top. Despite that, both men and their supporters aren't exactly fond of each other, and Hurin's arrival only causes more problems because Hurin is kind of an asshole whose sole purpose is to start shit with people at this point. The situation eventually escalates, resulting in a civil war that sees the deaths of both Hardang and Manfor, ending the House of Haleth. Following that, the men of the House of Haleth either flee south or retreat deeper into Brethil. Either way, they no longer play a role in the events around them. Hurin then leaves Brethil and goes to the ruins of Nargothrond. There he finds the Nauglamir, a necklace originally crafted by the dwarves for King Finrod Felagund. Hurin then goes to Doriath and gives the Nauglamir to King Thingol, first scornfully, but then as an actual token of thanks. Hurin then goes west and eventually throws himself into the ocean. As harsh as it is to say, it might have been better if he'd done that straight away. Our tale then moves to Doriath, because by coming to Doriath, Hurin has brought his curse with him. Thingol, taking the Nauglamir, decides to have the dwarves of Nogrod set the Silmaril in it, the same Silmaril that Beren and Luthien retrieved from Morgoth. The dwarves comply, but their greed overwhelms them, and they demand the Nauglamir as payment. Thingol rejects this, so the dwarves murder him in his own home, which is kind of ironic as Thingol is supposed to be the tallest elf in existence, and dwarves are, well, short. The dwarves are hunted down, but two of them manage to escape back to Nogrod. Thingol's death has huge ramifications for Doriath. Thingol has been their king for thousands of years, and he doesn't have an heir, so now they're leaderless. And more importantly, Thingol's death causes Melian to leave, lowering the magical girdle that protects Doriath. This is a big deal, because you know those two dwarves that escaped? They lie to their kinsmen in Nogrod and claim Thingol had them killed. Seeking revenge, the dwarves of Nogrod assemble an army and march on Doriath in 503. Doriath's army simply melts away as they're so demoralized by Thingol's death. The dwarves of Nogrod reach Menegroth without facing any resistance. Inside Menegroth, the Battle of the Thousand Caves is fought, and the losses on both sides are heavy. Mablung, the de facto leader of the Sindar, is slain defending Menegroth's vaults. The dwarves eventually emerge victorious, sacking Menegroth and stealing all of its treasure, including the Nauglamir and the Silmaril. However, this victory is short-lived, and as the dwarves are returning to Nogrod, they are ambushed by Beren and an army of Green Elves whilst crossing Sarn Athrad. The dwarves are utterly defeated, Beren personally kills Nogrod's king, and the few other survivors are killed by the Ents as they attempt to flee home. Beren then retrieves the Silmaril and takes it back to Tol Galen, where he and Luthien now live. In the end, tens of thousands of elves and dwarves have died for nothing, and Morgoth has taken another step towards victory without even lifting a finger. But it should be mentioned that this wasn't the end of Doriath. Battered and bloody, the kingdom survived the Dwarven invasion, but now they needed a leader. And this they had. Tuor, the son of Beren and Luthien, arrives in Doriath late in the year of 503, and he is crowned as King of Doriath. Late that same year, Beren and Luthien die their final deaths, which sounds weird to say, but it does apply to them. So Tuor receives the Nauglamir and the Silmaril, which makes him very pretty. But it also attracts unwanted attention. You see, the Sons of Feanor are still lurking around, and they're still bound to the Oath of Feanor, an oath that requires them to retrieve the Silmarils at any cost, from either friend or foe. The Silmarils have been out of reach ever since they were stolen. Morgoth wore them in Angband. The one Beren and Luthien retrieved was protected by Thingol and the Girdle of Melian, and for the short time Beren and Luthien possessed it again, the Sons of Feanor dared not attack them. But now Doriath was weak and unprotected, meaning one of the Silmarils was finally in reach. The Sons of Feanor send messages demanding Tuor relinquish the Silmaril, but Tuor refuses. Maedhros and Maeglin are hesitant on attacking Doriath, but Celegorm manages to convince the brothers, and they prepare for an assault. Worth mentioning that Celegorm is probably the most hated person in Beleriand after Morgoth at this point. In the middle of the winter of 506, the Sons of Feanor launch their surprise assault. Once again, battle is joined in Maedhros itself, resulting in the second kinslaying of elf on elf. Eventually, the Sons of Feanor are victorious, and Tuor and his wife, Nimloth, are slain, and Maedhros is sacked a second time, ending Doriath's brief second life. But the victory is bittersweet for the Sons of Feanor. Celegorm is slain by Tuor, and Caranthir and Curufin are also killed. In retribution, Celegorm's surviving followers take Ellared and Elurin, Tuor's young sons, and abandon them deep in the woods. Maedhros ultimately repents of this action and searches for the young brothers, but never finds them. Presumably, they starved to death deep in the woods. And who said elves can't be evil? To add insult to injury, the Sons of Feanor fail to retrieve the Silmaril. Tuor's young daughter, Elwing, and a remnant of Doriath's people manage to flee south to the mouth of Sirion. Here, refugees have been gathering since the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and a small haven has been established, supported by Círdan from the Isle of Balar. The Sons of Feanor fail in their ultimate objective, but nevertheless, Doriath is now completely destroyed, and it would not rise a third time. Tuor's reign as king lasted a mere 3 years, and his brief life lasted a mere 36 years. With Nargothrond and Doriath destroyed, only Gondolin remains. Now, Gondolin has remained completely closed off from the outside world since the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Turgon, the King of Gondolin and now High King of the Noldor, has a unique relationship with the Valar Ulmo, King of the Sea. And although Ulmo revealed the hidden valley of Tumladen to Turgon, he also informed Turgon that it wouldn't last forever, and that eventually he would send a messenger that would warn Turgon that the doom of Gondolin approaches. This messenger, the instrument of Ulmo's will, turns out to be Tuor, son of Huor, who was Hurin's brother who died during the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Tuor arrives in Gondolin in 496, shortly after the destruction of Nargothrond. However, Turgon, despite being known as the Wise, makes an unwise choice and decides not to abandon the city and lead his people south. He trusts in Gondolin's power and secrecy, ignorant to the fact that the situation in Beleriand is rapidly deteriorating and that soon Gondolin will be the only target left. Still, they have a few years of prosperity left. Tuor ends up marrying Idril, Turgon's daughter, the second man to marry an elf, and they have a son called Eärendil in 503. However, this doesn't please everyone, least of all Maeglin. Maeglin is Turgon's nephew, the son of Aredhel and Eöl, who are both long dead by this point. Maeglin has desired Idril his entire life, apparently having no problems with the fact that Idril is his cousin, and the fact that he can't have her has set off the darkness in his heart, the same possessive darkness that his father had. In fact, it is Maeglin who advises Turgon against abandoning Gondolin, and he is generally opposed to any counsel that Tuor gives. However, Tuor and Idril aren't just ready to ignore Ulmo's message, so they build a secret passage underneath Gondolin that leads into the mountains. As the years go on, Maeglin becomes more and more restless, owing mostly to Tuor's meteoric rise. He continues to ignore rules set by Turgon, one of which is that no one else is to leave the Ecoreath, the mountains that surround Gondolin. Maeglin, a keen miner, is always eager to uncover more riches, but in 509, whilst mining on the outside of the Ecoreath, he is captured by orcs and brought before Morgoth. Morgoth, aware of who Maeglin is, desires the location of Gondolin. Maeglin initially rejects, but relents once Morgoth threatens him with unimaginable torment. To sweeten the deal for Maeglin and to encourage his aid when Morgoth attacks the city, Morgoth promises him the lordship of Gondolin and the marriage of Idril once Turgon is overthrown. Maeglin readily accepts, although considering the fact that Morgoth is a chronic liar and is the most evil being in existence, it's unlikely that he genuinely planned on holding his end of the bargain. Nevertheless, Maeglin returns to Gondolin, acting as if nothing happened. The following year, Morgoth's army breaches the Ecoreath and assaults Gondolin. The battle is described in detail in the Fall of Gondolin book, but there are aspects of that book that don't fit with established canon, so I'll just give the brief Silmarillion version. The battle is extremely costly for Morgoth as his forces struggle to get inside of the city at first. However, his overwhelming numbers prove the difference and Gondolin is destroyed. Tuor kills Maeglin whilst the latter is trying to kill Aredhel and abduct Idril. Ecthelion dies fighting Gothmog, but not before killing the Lord of the Balrogs by driving his spiked helmet into his chest, causing them both to fall in a fountain and drown. Presumably, it was a deep fountain. The battle ends when Turgon's tower collapses on him, killing the 5th High King of the Noldor. However, some refugees escape through Idril's secret tunnel, led by Tuor, Idril, and Glorfindel. However, Glorfindel sacrifices himself to save the refugees when they are attacked by a Balrog as they escape through the mountains, killing the Balrog in the process. Much like those who survived Doriath, the survivors flee south to the havens of Sirion. With the fall of Gondolin, it seems unlikely that it would get worse, but it does. Most of Beleriand's refugees now live in the havens of Sirion or on the Isle of Balar, both elves and men. The Isle of Balar is ruled by Círdan and Gil-galad, now the new High King of the Noldor, and the havens are ruled by Tuor and Idril. Notably, however, is that Elwing still bears a Silmaril, and the remaining sons of Feanor are aware of this. However, without the bad influences of Caranthir or Celegorm, the remaining brothers, Maedhros, Maglor, Amrod, and Amras, are able to ignore the oath for a while. However, it eventually begins to eat away at them until it torments them. They send messages, but their demands are rejected. In 525, Tuor and Idril leave for Valinor, leaving Eärendil, who weds Elwing, as Lord of the Havens. In 532, Elrond and Elros are born, and it seems like life in the Havens of Sirion might end up being quite prosperous. This changes in 538. The Sons of Feanor gather their remaining followers and assault the Havens in a surprise attack, beginning the third kinslaying. When the attack commences, Eärendil is away, desperately searching for a way to Valinor, so the Haven's defenders are leaderless. Círdan and Gil-galad send ships to help, but they arrive too late. Elwing, in possession of the Silmaril, has thrown herself into the sea, and the Havens are completely destroyed. However, once again, the Sons of Feanor fail in their goal and the cost is high, as Amrod and Amras are slain, leaving Maedhros and Maglor as the only remaining brothers. At this point, Maglor's spirit is completely crushed, and he takes pity on Elrond and Elros, who were captured, and he adopts them as his own. But that one heartwarming tidbit shouldn't take away from the complete and utter despair of the situation. With the destruction of the Havens, Morgoth's domination of Beleriand is complete. The only remaining bastion of resistance is on the Isle of Balar, but Morgoth cares little for the sea, and knows that there is no foe left in Middle-earth that can possibly stop him. If the Elves and the Edain are to be victorious, help would have to come from outside of Middle-earth. But that's a story for the next episode. In previous battles, Morgoth's victory came down to the strength of his armies and his cunning strategies, but it must be said that it was the acts of individuals that left Beleriand in ruins by the year of 540. If Turin and Orodreth hadn't abandoned secrecy, then Nargothrond might not have been destroyed. If Hurin had not brought the Nauglamir to Thingol, then perhaps Doriath might not have been destroyed. If Maeglin had not defied Turgon's orders, then perhaps Gondolin might not have been destroyed. Morgoth worked hard to destroy his foes, yet in the final stretch of the race, his foes either made themselves easy targets or destroyed themselves. In the case of Doriath, Brethil, and the Havens of Sirion, Morgoth did not even have to lift a finger, and in the cases of Nargothrond and Gondolin, Morgoth was given an invitation to the very doors of those cities. In a time when the remaining elves and Edain should have been working together, they instead let themselves be destroyed, one by one, mostly through their own mistakes. And if there is any lesson to be learned, it would be that it only takes the pride of one man to lead to the destruction of so many others. Thank you for watching. Once again, this was a very long video, so I applaud you if you made it to the end. I had so much stuff to cram into a single video, as the final years of the First Age are some of the most detailed, action-packed years in Middle-earth's history. I was thinking about splitting it into 2 videos, but I want to get to the fun stuff of the Third Age as soon as possible. That's not to say that the First Age isn't fun, but I know people are very much looking forward to the battles like in the War of the Ring. These events are mostly covered in the Children of Hurin and the Fall of Gondolin, so if you haven't read them, then I recommend doing that, especially the Children of Hurin. It's one of my favourite stories Tolkien wrote, but it's a big difference from Lord of the Rings, as it's a huge tragedy rather than a heroic epic. I have one more video on the First Age, and then we move into the Second Age. So thank you, stay well, and remember, if you ever meet someone who has been cursed, turn around and walk the other way, because you don't want to get caught up in that shit.